Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins. The wind off the Pontar River carried the smell of wet leaves and iron. Autumn had come early to the Redanian borderlands, and with it, a silence that unsettled even the boldest men. The peasants of Holmfirth whispered that the nights were not their own anymore. Dogs howled at empty fields. Livestock vanished, and 3 villagers were found pale as chalk, their bodies cold and drained, yet not a drop of blood marred the soil beneath them. When Geralt of Rivia arrived, the town square emptied as though death himself had stepped into it. He dismounted his mare, Roach, and tied her by the well. His eyes, cat-like and amber, swept over the gathered faces, wary, frightened, and full of that familiar mix of hope and superstition. "I was told you've got a problem," he said. His voice was calm, clipped, edged with fatigue from too many such errands. The alderman, a squat man with a nose like a pickled beet, stepped forward, wringing his hat. "Aye, Witcher, a problem most foul. Folks go to bed healthy, and come morning, they're corpses. Not a wound, not a struggle, just gone. Bloodless like a butcher's washed carcass. No beast leaves such neat work." Geralt crouched beside a cart where one of the victims lay beneath a shroud. He lifted the linen gently, his face expressionless. The man's skin was white as tallow, the lips faintly blue, no bite marks, no torn flesh. Geralt's nostrils flared, searching for scent, iron, decay, the musk of predator. Nothing, not even fear. "No trace," he murmured. "No scent, no struggle." "You'll take the contract, then?" the alderman asked, voice trembling. Geralt's gaze flicked to him. "Depends on what you're paying." After the sum was agreed upon, the Witcher spent the night examining the scene of the latest death, a cottage by the river. The shutters had been locked from the inside. The hearth had gone cold hours before dawn. No forced entry, no signs of magic. Just a man in his bed, throat whole, blood gone. He found a single clue, a small patch of disturbed dust on the windowsill, as if someone had brushed a hand there. But when Geralt sniffed, it smelled of nothing at all. That troubled him more than any reek of rot or venom could have. He left the cottage and walked into the woods, letting his medallion hum faintly against his chest. The night was cold, and the moon silvered the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Somewhere closer, something else breathed. "Come out," Geralt said softly. The silence thickened. A shape detached itself from the darkness, tall, slender, moving with inhuman grace. Its eyes glowed crimson for a heartbeat, then dimmed. "You shouldn't be here," said a voice smooth as silk, tinged with a quiet sadness. Geralt's fingers tightened on the hilt of his silver sword. "Neither should you." The figure stepped into the moonlight, a pale face, aristocratic features, and the faintest smile. Geralt exhaled slowly. "Regis?" The higher vampire inclined his head. "It's been some time, my friend." Geralt sheathed his sword, though not without hesitation. "You're the last face I expected in Redania. Don't tell me these killings are your handiwork." Regis's expression was unreadable. "If they were, I wouldn't have left the bodies." "That's what worries me," Geralt said. They walked along the riverbank, speaking quietly. Regis explained that he had come not to kill, but to warn. "One of ours," he said, has lost his restraint. A higher vampire named Var Atra. You won't find his scent because he's masking it perfectly. He's old, Geralt, older than me. He's learned tricks even I dare not use. Why start now? What's he after? Revenge, Regis replied. The ones he hunts are not random. They're descendants of men who, centuries ago, betrayed his trust and his heart. Geralt frowned. So the victims here fit that lineage, Regis finished. You won't find a beast to slay in a cave or a crypt. You'll find a ghost wearing flesh, moving through walls, leaving no trace. He kills not for hunger, but memory. The Witcher gazed toward the distant lights of Holmfirth. Then we'll have to make him leave a trace. Regis's eyes glimmered faintly in the moonlight. Be careful, Geralt. Var Atr doesn't merely vanish. He erases scent, blood, even presence. To hunt him is to risk becoming one of his disappearances. Geralt looked at the river, at the mist curling above the surface like restless souls. I've faced worse. Regis smiled faintly. I doubt that. The vampire turned, his cloak whispering against the grass. Meet me at dawn by the old windmill east of town. There's someone you must speak to, a scholar from Oxenfurt who's been studying the lineage Var Atra hunts. He may have the key to stopping this. And with that, Regis dissolved into a swirl of mist, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves in his wake. Geralt stood alone beneath the waning moon, the night pressing close around him. He could sense something ancient stirring, something older than curses or contracts. Roach snorted softly as he returned. Easy, girl, he murmured, patting her neck. Looks like it's going to be another long hunt. He mounted and rode back toward the village. Behind him, unseen in the trees, 2 red eyes watched and then blinked out, leaving no trace at all. The dawn over Holmfirth was thin and colorless, like watered wine. Mist rolled low across the meadows, veiling the village in a gray hush. Geralt found the old windmill easily enough, a relic from better years, its blades cracked, its timbers moss-covered and leaning. Regis stood before it as calm and composed as though he had been waiting centuries rather than hours. Beside him lingered a man wrapped in a scholar's cloak, his hands trembling around a bundle of scrolls and a satchel brimming with notes. The Witcher's medallion thrummed lightly at his chest, reacting not to danger but to the faint residue of magic on the man's clothing. Geralt of Rivia, Regis said with quiet courtesy. Allow me to introduce Master Ortolan of Oxenfurt Academy. The scholar adjusted his spectacles with a nervous motion. Witcher, an honor. I've heard of you. Your profession, that is. You're here about the disappearances, I presume? Geralt gave a short nod. You've been studying the victims. I'm told they share a common ancestry. Ortolan swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Yes, they're all descendants of merchants and noblemen who, some 4 centuries ago, funded the founding of a Witcher school. One that was lost before your time. The School of the Crane, I believe it was called. Geralt frowned. Never heard of it? Most haven't, Regis said. It perished before the conjunction of the spheres reshaped our world again. Var Atra was alive then, a man of refinement, a physician. He loved a mortal woman, one who helped those same founders. When they turned on him, betrayed him for his nature, they burned his beloved at the stake. And so, Geralt said, his tone flat, he's hunting their bloodlines. Exactly, Ortolan whispered. But there's more. He's not feeding on them. He's performing a rite, a binding. The bodies you found drained of blood? That blood wasn't wasted. It was taken, stored, for something. Geralt's eyes narrowed. Something like what? The scholar hesitated. A resurrection, or rather, a return. He seeks to restore his lover. Regis's expression darkened, though his voice remained steady. He is delving into forbidden ground. To call a soul back from the cycle, even among my kind, that is madness. Madness or devotion, Geralt said quietly. Depends which side you stand on. They made their way from the windmill toward the village outskirts where the last victim had been buried. The cemetery lay on a rise above the river, its stones worn smooth by centuries of rain. The Witcher's boots sank into the damp soil as he knelt before the newest grave. "Open it," he told the gravedigger, a youth pale with fright. "My Lord Witcher, it's not right." "Do it," Geralt said simply. With trembling hands, the boy obeyed. As the spade bit into the earth, the smell of freshly turned soil mingled with something faint and wrong, sweet like perfume left too long in a tomb. When the coffin lid was pried open, Geralt saw that the corpse had not decayed. Its skin remained pale, smooth, unmarred. Yet beneath the eyelids, he could sense no life, no trace of it ever having lived. Regis leaned in, nostrils flaring. "Empty," he murmured, "completely drained. Not of blood alone, but essence, as if the very spark of being was drawn out." "Could a higher vampire do that?" Ortolan asked, clutching his notes to his chest. "Yes," Regis said softly, "but not without consequence. Each act tears a piece of his own self away. Var Atra is hollowing himself to bring her back." Geralt straightened, brushing dirt from his gloves. "Then the question is, where's he storing what he's taken?" As if in answer, the Witcher's medallion quivered sharply, then fell still. The air grew heavy, thick as oil. Geralt's hand went to his silver sword just as the shadows deepened at the far edge of the graveyard. A figure emerged, elegant as a courtier, draped in black, so deep it seemed to swallow light. His hair was white, his eyes the color of dying embers. "Looking for me?" he asked, voice smooth as velvet. "Var Atra," Regis breathed. The higher vampire's smile was gentle, almost kind. "My dear Emil Regis Rohelik Terzief Godefroy, you still meddle where you ought not. And you bring a Witcher no less. How typical." Geralt said nothing. His fingers rested lightly on the hilt, his stance relaxed but ready. "You've killed innocence," Regis said. "You dishonor what we are." "Innocence?" Var Atra's laughter was soft and distant, like wind through catacombs. "Their forefathers burned my world to ash. I merely finish what time began." "By emptying yourself until nothing remains?" Regis's voice hardened. "She would not have wanted this." The vampire's eyes flashed. "You know nothing of what she wanted." Geralt stepped forward. "Tell me where you keep the blood." For the first time, Var Atra's gaze turned to him fully, and the Witcher felt the weight of centuries press upon his chest. "Ah, the famed white wolf. You reek of destiny, but destiny is a poor shield against love, wouldn't you say?" Geralt's answer was his sword's whisper from its scabbard. The vampire moved before the sound had faded, a blur of shadow and mist. Steel met air. Geralt spun, slashing wide, but Var Atra had vanished, leaving only the echo of his laughter. "Stop," Regis said, holding up a hand. "You can't fight what's not here. He's teasing us, probing our intent. He'll strike when we're divided." Geralt sheathed his sword, jaw tight. "Then we don't divide. We find where he's nesting." "I may know," Ortolan said, trembling. "The archives in Oxenfurt speak of an abandoned keep, built over an ancient crypt. north of here, by the cliffs of Riken Vale. It was said to house relics of the School of the Crane. If Var Atra seeks to bind souls, he'd need such a place. Then that's where we're headed, Geralt said. Regis looked toward the river where the fog was thickening once more, veiling the far bank like a shroud. He'll be waiting, Geralt, and he'll know we're coming. Good, the Witcher replied, swinging into Roach's saddle. Saves us the trouble of sneaking in. They rode north as the sun bled across the horizon, turning the mist to molten gold. Behind them, the windmill creaked in the morning wind, lonely and ancient. Ahead lay the cliffs of Riken Vale, and whatever waited beneath their shadows, the hunt had begun. The cliffs of Riken Vale rose like the ribs of some titanic beast, their jagged peaks cutting through the clouds. Below, the valley was draped in fog, the kind that swallowed light and sound alike. Geralt guided Roach along a crumbling path, her hooves crunching on frost-bitten stones. Regis glided silently beside him, the hem of his cloak unsoiled despite the mud and damp. Behind them, Ortolan labored to keep pace, his breath coming in ragged gasps as his mule stumbled over roots. By midday, they reached what remained of the keep. The towers were broken, their tops caved in, and the gate hung crooked from one hinge. Ivy crept up the stones like veins, gripping the ruin in a slow, patient death. Geralt dismounted and took in the sight. Looks like it's been abandoned for centuries, he muttered. On the surface, Regis said. But below is where the School of the Crane built its sanctum. They believed enlightenment came from blending flesh and spirit, a place for witchers and mages to meet in secret. Geralt's lip twitched. That worked out well, Regis smiled faintly. Few things forged by ambition ever do. The Witcher crouched, brushing snow from a half-buried sigil carved into the flagstones. It depicted a stylized bird, wings spread, talons clutching a sword. He traced the lines with a gloved finger. Still faintly magical. I can feel it. Indeed, Regis murmured, eyes narrowing. He's already been here. The scent, though faint, is unmistakable. Var Atra cloaked his trail, but I know his essence, like the taste of a forgotten wine. Then we're close, Geralt said. The entrance to the catacombs lay through a cracked stairwell at the back of the courtyard. The stones groaned underfoot as they descended. Each step took them deeper into the dark, until even the faint light from above was devoured. Geralt struck flint to steel and lit a torch. The walls came alive with carvings, murals of warriors locked in combat, of beasts slain, and beneath it all, the ever-present crane, a symbol of vigilance and sacrifice. Ortolan's voice trembled as he whispered, "This place, it said the masters here sought to purify witchers of their emotions. They believed detachment was the highest form of strength." "Detachment doesn't keep you alive," Geralt replied. "Instinct does." They reached a chamber vast and circular, its ceiling lost to darkness. A stone table dominated the center, ringed by cracked braziers and faded runes. Upon the table lay several glass vials, each filled with dark, thick liquid. Blood. "His work," Regis said grimly. "He's begun the binding." Geralt leaned closer, studying the sigils scrawled in crimson across the table's edge. "This isn't necromancy. It's older, closer to alchemy." Ortolan adjusted his spectacles, peering over the Witcher's shoulder. "Yes, he's trying to anchor her spirit to a vessel of flesh, to rebuild her body from what remains of his victims, but that would require an immense source of power," Regis finished. and an offering willingly given. He's killing them not out of rage, but necessity. Before Geralt could reply, his medallion vibrated sharply. He turned toward the shadows at the far side of the chamber. The torchlight flickered, and the darkness seemed to move. "Step back," Geralt hissed. A figure materialized, tall and thin, dressed in mourning black. It was not Var Atra, but something fashioned in his likeness. An illusion, yet made of flesh and malice. Its eyes were hollow pits, its smile too wide. Regis's fangs flashed. A mimic shade. He's testing us again. The creature lunged. Geralt met it head-on, steel singing as it cut through air and shadow alike. The blade met resistance, a shriek of unnatural pain echoing through the chamber. The shade dissolved into mist, but not before clawing across the Witcher's chest, tearing leather and flesh alike. "Geralt!" Regis caught him before he fell, the vampire's grip unnaturally steady. "He's watching us." That strike was meant to draw blood. Geralt grimaced, binding the wound quickly with a strip of linen. "He can have my blood. He won't like what it tastes like." A low chuckle echoed through the hall, Var Atra's voice soft and mocking. "You wound me, White Wolf. Truly, I expected you to come sooner. The body should have been enough bait." "Show yourself," Geralt growled. "I will," the voice purred. "When my work is done, when she breathes again." "You cannot stop love, Witcher. You can only misunderstand it." The torchlight dimmed. The vials shattered one by one, spilling dark blood across the floor. The liquid crept like living ink, threading along the carvings, seeping into the stone. The air thickened, humming with energy. Regis swore under his breath, a rare slip in his composure. "He's begun the ritual. We must break the circle before it completes." Geralt nodded once. "Tell me how." "Destroy the heart of the sigil. It's bound to the altar." Geralt dashed forward, sword raised high, and brought it down with a grunt. The steel met stone, and an invisible force flung him backward. The walls trembled. From the cracks above, dust rained like dry snow. "Too late," Regis said, eyes wide. From the blood-slicked table, something stirred, a shape forming, pale and human, wrapped in the scent of ancient sorrow. The semblance of a woman's face emerged, serene and lifeless. Her eyes opened, empty, searching. "Malera," whispered a voice from nowhere and everywhere. At last, the figure reached out, her hand trembling, translucent. "Var!" But even as she spoke, her form flickered, destabilizing. The ritual faltered. Regis seized Geralt's arm. "He's failed to bind her fully. We can use that." "How?" "Destroy the focus stone. The ritual anchors through the crystal. There." Regis pointed to a red gem embedded in the altar's base, glowing faintly through the blood. Geralt lunged. His sword struck true. The gem shattered in a burst of crimson light that scorched the air and hurled them both to the ground. When the light faded, the chamber fell silent. The blood was gone. The altar cracked. Only the faint echo of a woman's sigh lingered, fading into nothing. Geralt pushed himself to his feet, chest heaving. "Is it over?" Regis's expression was grave. "No, he's still out there, and now he'll know we've ruined his work. He'll come for us." Ortolan sat trembling on the floor, clutching his satchel to his chest. "If he does, we're doomed. You saw the power he wields." "Enough," Geralt said, wiping blood from his blade. "We've cut his tether. He's angry now, not invincible. That makes him predictable." Regis met the Witcher's gaze. "You mean to hunt him?" "I mean to end this." Above them the ruins groaned in protest as wind whistled through broken stone. The storm was coming. real and otherwise. Then we move before nightfall, Regis said softly, before he strikes back. The Witcher nodded once. Together they climbed the long stairway out of the catacombs, the torchlight flickering behind them, casting their shadows high upon the walls. Two hunters rising from the dark, and below, somewhere unseen, the ancient vampire's laughter echoed still. It carried on the wind long after they were gone. The storm broke over Reichenvale by dusk. Rain fell in thin, slanting lines, the kind that soaked through armor and chilled a man to his bones. Lightning stitched the sky, illuminating the jagged ruins of the keep for fleeting heartbeats at a time. Geralt and Regis took shelter in the half-collapsed gatehouse while Ortolan huddled close to the meager fire the Witcher managed to coax from damp wood. Outside, the wind howled like a thing alive, tearing at the dead ivy and shaking the old stones as if trying to wake the ghosts buried within. Geralt stared into the fire, his white hair plastered against his face, steam rising from his armor as the rain hissed against it. "He'll come tonight," Regis said quietly, his voice almost drowned by the storm. "He won't allow this slight to go unanswered." Geralt nodded. "Then let him come." The vampire regarded him sidelong. "You sound too certain." "I've seen creatures lash out when their plans collapse. Rage makes them careless." "Careless, yes," Regis mused, "but not weak. Remember who he is. Varatra was once a healer, not a hunter. His mind is as sharp as ever. He'll strike, not with claws, but with cunning." Geralt fed another branch into the flames. Sparks rose and vanished. "Then we outthink him." For a time they sat in silence, save for the roar of the wind. Ortolan dozed uneasily, his quill-stained fingers twitching as though still scratching notes across parchment. When at last the scholar stirred, his eyes were wide and haunted. "I dreamt of her," he whispered. "The woman, the one he's trying to bring back. Malara. She spoke to me. She said he's bound her between worlds, trapped her in memory. Every time he fails to resurrect her, he tightens the chain." Regis's gaze darkened. "That explains the whisper we heard in the chamber. He's tethered her spirit, forcing her to linger." Geralt looked up. "Which means he's still trying. And he'll need more blood." Lightning flared again, casting the world in blue-white light. For an instant, Geralt saw something on the far ridge, a silhouette standing against the storm, cloak whipping in the wind. "Stay here," he ordered. He rose and stepped out into the rain, drawing his silver sword. The downpour masked all scent, muffled every sound. The figure on the ridge had vanished, yet the Witcher's instincts screamed danger. His medallion vibrated, a steady, growing hum. He moved through the courtyard, boots splashing in shallow puddles, eyes cutting through the sheets of rain. Then a whisper brushed his ear, low and cold. "White wolf." He turned. A woman stood by the broken well, pale and translucent, rain passing through her like smoke. Her face was beautiful and terrible at once, eyes hollow, mouth trembling. "Malara," Geralt said softly. She tilted her head. "He will find me again. He promised." "You're bound to him. You have to let go." Her expression twisted in anguish. "He doesn't let go. He made me from memory. I am nothing but what he remembers." Lightning split the sky once more. The vision shuddered, and a dark shape materialized behind her, tall and regal, crimson eyes gleaming. Varatra stepped forward as the specter dissolved into mist. "You meddle in affairs beyond you, Witcher." Geralt's sword rose in a fluid motion. "You've made your affairs everyone's problem." The vampire's lips curved in a faint smile. "Do you know what it is to lose everything? to watch centuries crumble and the one face that anchored you fade into the dark? I have only her name left, and you would take even that from me." Geralt advanced, his movements deliberate. "You've taken dozens of lives trying to fill that void. Doesn't seem to be working. Mortals," Var-Attre hissed, "squander their time and call it living. They worship decay and call it love. I only wish to preserve what was pure." "And you call that love?" Geralt's eyes were hard as winter steel. "Sounds more like possession." For a heartbeat, Var-Attre's face twisted with fury, and then suddenly calm. "Perhaps. But tell me, Witcher, if you could bring back what you lost, wouldn't you try?" Geralt said nothing. He thought of faces long gone, Renfri, Vesemir, countless others, and the ache that never quite dulled. The vampire saw it. "Ah, so even you are haunted." Lightning flashed again, and in that instant Var-Attre vanished. Geralt spun, parrying on instinct. The vampire's claws met silver, sparks flying as steel screeched against inhuman strength. The impact threw Geralt back several paces. He rolled, came up, crouching. "Fast," he muttered. "Faster than most," came Regis's voice from behind. The higher vampire blurred into view, striking at Var-Attre with blinding speed. For moments, the two beings were nothing but shadows clashing amid the storm, their blows cracking the air. Geralt moved to flank, waiting for an opening. But Var-Attre was no ordinary foe. He dissolved and reformed like mist, each strike phasing through his image. "Stop hiding behind illusions," Regis roared. Var-Attre's laughter rang out, cold and beautiful. "Illusions? My dear Regis, you of all should know we are illusions that learn to dream." Then he turned his gaze on Geralt, and the world shifted. The courtyard melted away. The rain stopped. Geralt stood in Kaer Morhen's courtyard, sun shining, the scent of pine thick in the air. Ciri laughed as she sparred with Lambert, her movements light and sure. Vesemir stood at the gates, pride softening his old eyes. "Not real," Geralt whispered, but his throat ached with the lie. "Wouldn't you rather stay here?" Var-Attre's voice floated from nowhere and everywhere. "No contracts, no blood, just what you lost." Geralt gritted his teeth. He raised his sword, but the steel felt heavy, his limbs sluggish, the illusion clawing at his will. Then a voice cut through the haze, calm, steady, familiar. "Regis." "Geralt, remember what you are." The Witcher blinked. The vision flickered, colors draining away. With a snarl, he drove his blade into the ground. Pain flared, sharp and real. The false world shattered. He stood once more amid the storm, Var-Attre recoiling as though burned. "Impressive," the vampire hissed. "Few mortals could break free." Geralt wiped rain from his eyes. "I've had practice." Regis stepped forward, fangs bared. "Enough of this." Their clash resumed, two predators bound by ancient power. The night erupted in violence. Geralt darted between them, his blade flashing when he found an opening. Silver met shadow, sparks and blood flying alike. At last Var-Attre faltered. Regis struck him full in the chest, driving him back against the crumbling wall. The vampire gasped, crimson eyes flaring wide. "End it," Regis said through clenched teeth. Geralt hesitated only a heartbeat before plunging his sword into Var-Attre's heart. The blade sang as it met resistance, then sank deep. Var-Attre stared down at the weapon, disbelief flickering across his face. "You, cannot destroy what love remembers." The world seemed to still. Then he smiled, a sad, weary smile, and disintegrated into mist. When the air cleared, nothing remained but silence and rain. Geralt leaned on his sword, chest heaving. Is it over? Regis gazed at the empty space where his kin had stood. For him, perhaps. For her, I don't know. Some bonds leave echoes that never fade. The storm began to ease, the first stars breaking through the clouds. Geralt sheathed his sword and turned toward the scholar, who stood pale and shivering at the gatehouse door. Write this down, Ortolan, he said. Not as a tale of monsters, as a warning. The scholar swallowed hard. A warning, Witcher? Geralt's eyes, pale and tired, met his. That some loves are better left to die. And with that he mounted Roach and rode into the night, the storm behind him fading to whispers, the world once more heavy with quiet. But far off, in the dark heart of the vale, the faintest echo of a woman's sigh drifted on the wind, soft, sorrowful, and searching still. Dawn came pale and wan, a ghostly light creeping over the soaked hills of Reichen Vale. The storm had passed, leaving behind the scent of wet stone and ash. The valley, silent as a tomb, seemed to hold its breath. Geralt and Regis rode in silence, the Witcher's cloak torn and heavy with rain, the vampire's gaze distant and unreadable. Neither spoke for some time. They followed the broken trail leading north, away from the ruins and the grave silence of what had passed. The scholar Ortolan had begged to remain behind, too shaken to continue. Geralt had granted the request. He was no swordsman, and the road ahead promised more peril than parchment could record. The Witcher glanced at Regis. You're quiet, he said at last. Regis's eyes, pale and ancient, flicked toward him. When one of my kind dies, the silence that follows isn't just absence, it's dissonance. The world grows still for a heartbeat, as though unsure how to move on. You mourn him? I mourn what he was, Regis replied, before the centuries twisted him into something else. We are creatures of memory, Geralt. Strip memory away and we vanish. Geralt said nothing. The path wound through birch woods, where dew clung to the leaves like tears. He could still hear Var Atra's final words. You cannot destroy what love remembers. They echoed in his mind like an unfinished melody. Do you believe he's truly gone? Geralt asked quietly. Regis hesitated. Destroyed, yes. Gone, not yet. His essence lingers. That is the danger with those of our blood. We do not die as you do. We fade, slowly. Then we'd better see he doesn't fade into someone else's shadow, the Witcher said. They rode until the sun began to burn through the fog, revealing a hamlet nestled at the edge of the valley. The villagers stared as they approached. One man silver-haired, the other too still, too poised to be entirely human. Geralt dismounted before the inn, its sign creaking weakly in the wind. Inside, warmth and the smell of stew greeted them. The innkeeper, a woman broad of shoulder and sharper of tongue, looked them over warily. Not from around here, she said. Geralt unbuckled his sword belt and set it by the table. We're passing through. Food, ale, and a corner to rest. The woman nodded, eyes flicking to Regis. And for him, Regis smiled with disarming grace. Hot wine, if you have it. I assure you, madam, I dine elsewhere. Her frown deepened, but she said nothing further. When she left, Geralt leaned forward, voice low. You said his essence lingers. Could he still reach her? Not alone, Regis said, but through the memory of those who encountered her, perhaps. Spirits are drawn to remembrance. If anyone here has spoken her name, dreamt of her, or seen her shade since the storm, it means the bond persists. Then we ask, They ate quickly, then began their quiet inquiries. Villagers proved reluctant to speak, though one old shepherd finally confessed, trembling, that he had seen a woman walking the ridge at dawn. White dress, no footprints, eyes like moonlight. She didn't look real, he stammered, but she sang a sad tune, soft as a prayer. Geralt felt the familiar weight of dread settle in his chest. He thanked the man, tossed a few crowns on the table, and stood. Regis? The ridge? The vampire nodded. They climbed the winding path that overlooked the hamlet. From above, the valley stretched wide and silver under the rising sun. The air was thin and sharp, filled with the scent of damp earth. Halfway up, Regis halted. "You feel it too," he murmured. Geralt's medallion had begun to tremble faintly. "Something's here." They crested the ridge, and there she was, Malara. Her form shimmered like mist, half there, half gone. She turned toward them slowly, her expression neither sorrowful nor kind. "Why do you follow?" she asked, voice like a bell heard underwater. "To set you free?" Regis said softly. Her eyes shifted to him, faint recognition stirring. "Regis? The healer? You walked with him once?" "Yes," he said, "and I watched him lose himself for love of you." Her gaze drifted past him to Geralt. "And you, White Wolf, you carry ghosts of your own. Why save me? I am nothing but memory." Geralt's jaw tightened. "Because memory shouldn't bleed the living dry." For a long moment, the ghost said nothing. The wind hissed through the grass, and the light flickered as clouds crossed the sun. Then her voice softened. "He promised me forever. He kept that promise too well." Regis stepped forward. "You can end it. Let go of what binds you. His blood has lost its hold." Her form flickered, translucent fingers brushing the air. "I don't remember what it means to let go." Geralt reached into his satchel and drew out a small crystal vial, the last remnant of the ritual blood he had salvaged before leaving the ruins. Within, the liquid gleamed faintly crimson. "This is what ties you to him," he said. "His last trace. You destroy this and you'll find peace." Her gaze lingered on the vial. "Peace?" she repeated softly, as if tasting a forgotten word. Regis extended a hand. "Do it, Malara." For a heartbeat she hesitated. Then her eyes filled with tears that were not tears at all, but drops of light. She reached for the vial. Her touch passed through it once, twice, then solidified. With a trembling motion, she crushed it between her palms. The crystal shattered soundlessly. A rush of wind tore through the ridge, scattering the mist. Geralt felt a weight lift, an unseen pressure vanish. Malara smiled faintly, the expression fragile and human. "Tell him," she whispered, voice fading. "Tell him I was never angry." And then she was gone. Silence fell. The valley below gleamed with sunlight breaking through the clouds. Regis closed his eyes, bowing his head. "It's done," Geralt said quietly. "Yes," Regis replied, "and yet somehow I feel no triumph, because some victories don't feel like winning." They stood there a while, letting the wind wash the ghosts away. When they finally descended, the hamlet seemed brighter, the people already at work, as though some unseen shadow had lifted. At the stables, Regis turned to Geralt. "You'll head back to Oxenfurt, I suppose. Report to your alderman that the killings have ended." "I will," the Witcher said. "And you?" Regis looked toward the horizon, where the mountains shimmered in the morning haze. "There are old debts I've yet to pay. Perhaps it's time I tended to them." Geralt nodded. "Take care, Regis." "And you, my friend. Try not to make the world bleed too much on your behalf." They parted at the crossroads. Witcher riding east, vampire vanishing into the morning mist. Geralt rode in silence, his thoughts a tangle of faces and echoes. The land stretched quiet before him, washed clean by the rain, yet the words still lingered. You cannot destroy what love remembers. He wondered not for the first time if that was true. The road bent south, and the wind carried with it the faint scent of lilac and gooseberries, a memory so sharp it almost made him smile. He let it fade, as all things do, into the rhythm of Roach's steady gait and the whisper of another story's end. And somewhere far behind him, in the shadowed vale, the last of the storm clouds drifted apart, leaving no trace. The road to Oxenfurt wound along the Pontar like a silver ribbon, twisting through meadows and abandoned fields. The air smelled of wet grass and river reeds, sharp and clean after the storm. Geralt rode slowly, letting Roach choose her pace. The wind tugged at his cloak, and for the first time in many nights, his medallion lay quiet against his chest. The world had stilled, but the Witcher's mind had not. Memory clung to him like damp wool. Var Atter's final smile, Malera's fading words, Regis's solemn face as they parted ways. Monsters he could slay, curses he could break, but love twisted by centuries, that left wounds no blade could mend. By midday the spires of Oxenfurt came into view, rising proud above the misty waters. The city seemed almost peaceful, though its beauty was a thin mask over the usual Redanian unrest. Geralt passed the guards at the bridge without incident. Few dared question a Witcher who looked like he'd ridden through death and come out the other side. He stabled Roach at the river inn, left her with a pat and a muttered promise of oats, and made his way through the streets. The cobblestones glistened with rain, and the air carried the familiar scents of tar, ale, and wet parchment. Students in scholars' robes hurried past him, arguing loudly about magical theory, blissfully unaware that the true horrors of the world rarely fit in their books. The alderman's office was near the marketplace. Inside, the man who'd first summoned him looked up from a pile of documents, his small eyes widening. "By the gods," he stammered, "you look like death chewed you up and spat you out." "Feels about right," Geralt said. "It's done. The killings will stop." The alderman swallowed. "You found the culprit?" "Something like that." Geralt didn't elaborate. The man wouldn't understand, and he didn't need to. He handed over the written report. Concise, stripped of anything that hinted at vampires or resurrected lovers. Just the facts. A dangerous creature slain. A threat removed. The alderman read it, nodded rapidly, and fetched a pouch of coin. "Oxenfurt thanks you, Witcher. You've done the city a service." Geralt took the pouch, heavy and clinking, but didn't count it. "Tell your guards to burn the bodies of the victims, every one of them." The man blanched. "Burn? But the families—" "Burn them," Geralt repeated, his voice flat, "or the sickness spreads." That silenced further argument. He left the office and stepped into the sunlight. The sky had cleared fully, now pale and hard as tempered steel. For a moment he considered leaving the city behind and riding for Kaer Morhen. The path had been long and the winter months drew near, but before he could make that choice, a voice called from behind him. "Witcher, Geralt of Rivia." He turned. A young man hurried toward him, robes marked with the sigil of Oxenfurt Academy. His hair stuck out in every direction, and ink stained his fingers. "Master Ortolan sent me," the student gasped. "He bade me find you at once, said it was urgent." Geralt's brow furrowed. "Ortolan? He stayed behind at the Vale." Yes, the youth said, but he's come to Oxenfurt. Arrived this morning raving about something buried beneath the university's archives. He claims it's connected to your case. Geralt exhaled slowly. Of course he does. He followed the student through narrow streets until they reached the academy gates. The place smelled of damp stone and candle wax. Inside, Ortolan awaited, pale, sleepless, his hair wild, his eyes fever bright. Geralt, he cried, rushing forward, you have to see this. The Witcher folded his arms. You were supposed to rest. No time, the scholar said, waving a sheaf of parchment. I searched the restricted archives, found records of the School of the Crane's founders, alongside something else, a ledger of their patrons. One of those names matches a noble family still holding lands near the city. The Red Mantles. Geralt's eyes narrowed. What about them? They're hosting a gathering tonight. I believe Var Atra had dealings with their ancestors. He may have left something behind, a relic, perhaps a vessel for his essence. Geralt frowned. He's dead, Ortolan. We saw him vanish. Vanished, yes, but destroyed? The scholar's voice shook. You said yourself, his kind doesn't die easily. What if what you saw was merely dispersion, a temporary unraveling? Regis's warning echoed in Geralt's mind. He fades slowly. Where? The Witcher asked. Ortolan's hands trembled as he pointed toward the window. North Quarter, the Red Mantle Estate. They're celebrating the Lord's heir coming of age. Half the city's nobility will be there. Geralt grimaced. Perfect place for a monster to hide. By dusk, he stood outside the manor gates. Lanterns flickered through stained glass. Music drifted into the night. Violins, laughter, the clinking of crystal. Geralt adjusted his cloak, concealing the sword strapped to his back. He'd faced wraiths, drowners, and curses older than the Conjunction, but noble gatherings had their own kind of danger. Inside, the ballroom was a blaze of color and perfume. Men in brocade and women in silks turned to stare as the Witcher entered, boots muddy, eyes cold. Conversations faltered, a few muttered prayers. Lord Redmantle, a tall, silver-haired man with a practiced smile, approached. Witcher of Rivia, is it? I was told your services were not required here. That depends, Geralt said. Heard you had old ties to the founders of the School of the Crane. The Lord's smile froze. Where did you hear that? Doesn't matter, Geralt replied. His medallion pulsed faintly. Something's off in this house. The air had that telltale stillness before bloodshed. His senses sharpened. Beneath the perfume and roasted meats, a faint undertone of copper and rot. He followed it to the edge of the hall, past tapestries and gilded doors, to a staircase leading down. The cellar was cold, lined with casks and barrels, and there, at its heart, stood a statue. A woman in white marble, lifelike, sorrowful, hands outstretched as if in prayer. Geralt's pulse quickened. Malara's face. Before he could move, the shadows behind the statue shifted and coalesced into a familiar form. Var Atra, but different. His body wavered, insubstantial, the outline shimmering like smoke. You didn't think it would end so easily, did you, Witcher? He said softly. You broke the bond, but I remain. Memory cannot die. It only finds a new host. Then this time, Geralt said, drawing his sword, I'll make sure there's nothing left to remember. Var Atra's laughter filled the cellar, echoing off the stone. Come then, White Wolf. Let us see which of us the world refuses to forget. Steel met shadow once more, the clash ringing through the hollow dark. And above, the nobles danced, unaware, as the storm returned, beneath their very feet. The air in the red mantle cellar thickened until it pressed against the skin like damp cloth. The torchlight flickered, elongating Var Atra's shadow across the barrels and stone. Geralt's medallion thrummed with such force that it bruised the hollow of his throat. He shifted his stance, silver sword in hand, and studied the creature that had once been a man and then, for a time, something more than man. Var Atra's form was unsteady, rippling as though caught between worlds. His voice came from every corner of the cellar at once. "You freed her?" I felt her release, a silence so complete it screamed. "Do you know what that means for me, Witcher? I am what remains of a promise unkept." "Then you're nothing," Geralt said. "Nothing is all that endures." The vampire moved, not the blur of a beast striking, but a slow folding of darkness. Geralt rolled aside as claws sliced air where his throat had been. The torch guttered, plunging the room into half-shadow. Steel sang. The Witcher's blade met resistance like tempered glass. Sparks cascaded across the floor. "You still bleed, then," Geralt muttered, circling. "Only for her." Var Atra lunged again, faster this time. Geralt countered, pivoted, felt claws rake his shoulder before he could twist free. Pain flared white. He shoved forward, slashing at the creature's side. Silver scored a line through mist. Black blood hissed against the blade. For an instant the vampire wavered, his face, no longer monstrous, surfacing from the smoke. It was handsome, weary, terribly human. "You think yourself judge?" he whispered. "Yet you too are bound by ghosts." The cellar shuddered. Bottles shattered, spilling wine that steamed like blood on the cold flagstones. The scent of it stirred the air, rich, metallic. The statue of Malara trembled on its plinth, fine cracks running through the marble throat. Above, music faltered. Someone screamed. Then the first crash of panic rippled through the ballroom. Geralt didn't spare a glance upward. "You wanted her memory to last forever," he said, stepping closer, "but all you've done is turn it to ash." Var Atra's eyes burned crimson, then burn with me. He struck, a blur of talons and fury. Geralt dropped low, rolling beneath the blow, and slashed upward. The silver sliced through shoulder and chest. The vampire staggered, howling. The cry was not pain, it was grief. Shadows poured from the wound, coiling like smoke alive. Geralt braced for the counterstrike, but it didn't come. Var Atra stumbled toward the statue, clutching his chest. "She's gone," he murmured, touching the marbled cheek. "The echo fades." "Let it fade," Geralt said. The vampire looked back. "Can you?" He laughed then, a sound both hollow and soft, and pressed his hand against the statue's heart. Stone cracked. The figure split from crown to feet, a thin beam of light spilling from within. Regis's voice rang out behind Geralt, sudden and urgent. "Step away." The Witcher turned. The higher vampire had descended soundlessly, cloak still slick from the rain. His expression was grim. "He's binding what's left of his essence to the stone. When it breaks, the release will tear this place apart." "Then stop him." "I intend to." Regis blurred forward. The two vampires collided in a whirl of claws and shadow. Geralt backed away, shielding his face as fragments of marble flew. The statue imploded, showering the chamber with dust and light. When the glare dimmed, Var Atra lay crumpled against the far wall, his form already unraveling. Regis stood over him, chest heaving, though he needed no air. "Old friend," Var Atra whispered, voice faint. "Do you remember the color of dawn?" Regis hesitated. "Yes." "I don't." A fragile smile crossed the dying creature's face. "Then you must carry it for me." His body dissolved, scattering like mist in sunlight. For a moment the cellar glowed faintly red, then went still. Only the rain outside broke the silence. Geralt lowered his sword. "You shouldn't have followed me." Regis wiped dark residue from his hands. "I had to. He was one of us. And you, Witcher, you are too quick to shoulder solitude. Habit." The vampire's gaze lingered on the shattered statue. He wasn't lying. The bond between love and memory, there's power in it. You severed it with steel. Perhaps that mercy is the rarest thing we offer. From above came the clamor of terrified nobles. Regis tilted his head. "You should leave before they decide you're the villain of the evening." Geralt sheathed his sword. "Wouldn't be the first time." They climbed the narrow stairs back to the ballroom. The guests had fled, overturning tables and scattering goblets across the polished floor. The chandelier still burned, dripping wax like slow tears. Geralt paused beside one of the broken windows and looked out. Dawn's first light touched the river beyond the city, turning it to molten silver. Regis joined him. "You'll ride for Kaer Morhen? Soon, winter's coming." The vampire smiled faintly. "It always is." Geralt glanced sideways. "What will you do?" "I think," Regis said, "I shall go south. There are monasteries there, where no one asks questions of a pale hermit who keeps to the crypts. Perhaps I'll find silence enough to think." "Good luck finding that." They shared a brief nod, the kind that carried more than words. Then Regis melted into shadow and was gone. Geralt stood alone in the ruined hall, the echoes of music still clinging to the air. He thought of Malera, of Var-Atra, of all the things people refused to release. The sun rose higher, throwing light through stained glass. Red and gold rippled across his face. He turned and walked out through the shattered doors, boots ringing on the marble. The guards parted without question. Outside, the streets glistened with morning dew. Oxenfurt was waking, oblivious to the war waged beneath its feet. At the inn, Roach waited, patient as ever. Geralt tightened the saddle straps and swung up into the seat. He cast one last look back at the city's towers. For a moment he could almost imagine a figure on the highest balcony. A woman in white, smiling faintly, before fading into the dawn. "Another job done," he murmured, "another ghost buried." Roach snorted, unimpressed, and started forward. The road unfurled before them, damp and gleaming. The Witcher rode on, leaving Oxenfurt and its shadows behind. By noon the land opened into the low meadows of Temeria. The scent of clover and river mud filled the air. Geralt loosened his cloak, feeling the sun on his back. For once, there was no immediate hunt, no cries for help on the wind, only the steady rhythm of hooves and the murmur of distant water. Yet even in peace, his mind turned toward the next darkness. Somewhere ahead, another contract waited, another village whispered of monsters. He would go as he always did, because that was his trade, his curse, his small defiance against the endless forgetting of the world. And behind him, where Reichenvale lay quiet once more, the broken statue of Malera caught the first true light of day. It gleamed faintly, then crumbled, its dust carried away on the wind, leaving no trace. By the time Geralt crossed the Pontar and entered Temerian lands, the season had shifted again. Winter crept over the valleys, its breath cold and sure, frost in the tips of the reeds and stiffening the ground beneath Roach's hooves. The Witcher welcomed the change. The cold was honest. It asked nothing, promised nothing, unlike men and their endless bargains. He rode without hurry, following the river road westward, where the map thinned and the air smelled of pine and iron. Villages were sparse here, the people fewer still, yet word of a witcher traveled faster than any raven. By the third day, a farmer flagged him down at the edge of a field choked with frost-bitten stalks.
"You're the White Wolf," the man said, removing his cap with a nervous hand. "Got trouble down in the fen. Things come out at dusk. Take chickens, dogs, sometimes worse. No one sees them proper." Geralt listened, eyes half-lidded. Tracks? None. Not so much as a footprint. That caught the Witcher's attention. No traces. Again. He dismounted. "Show me." The man led him down a muddy lane that wound through cattails and low mist. The fens spread wide, still as a graveyard. Here and there, water glimmered between the reeds, dark as glass. "They come from that side," the farmer whispered, pointing toward a half-collapsed shack that leaned drunkenly against the fog. "Used to belong to old Marta. She died last winter. No one's dared go near since." Geralt studied the place. The door hung loose, swaying slightly despite the windless air. "Go home," he said. "Lock your doors. I'll see to it." The man hesitated, then obeyed, vanishing up the lane with hurried steps. Geralt drew his steel sword, not the silver yet, and approached the shack. His medallion trembled faintly. Inside, the darkness seemed thick, almost alive. He stepped through the doorway, boots sinking into damp straw. The smell hit him first, not rot, but something older, drier, like parchment and dusted bones. On the far wall, a mirror hung crooked, its surface clouded by age. Across the floor, faint lines had been carved into the wood, runes, half-worn. "Old magic," he muttered, "folk sorcery." He crouched to inspect the symbols, brushing away debris. The runes spoke of warding, of rest for the dead, but they'd been scratched through, deliberately defaced. The mirror opposite reflected his movement faintly, and then for a heartbeat, reflected something else, a shape behind him. Geralt spun, sword raised, but the room was empty, only the sound of reeds. Outside, whispering like voices half-remembered. The mirror flickered again. This time the reflection was not his own, but a woman's, a pale face, long hair, hanging wet over hollow eyes. "Who disturbs my house?" she asked. Her voice was neither echo nor sound. It filled his skull like a whisper from within. Geralt kept his tone steady. "Geralt of Rivia, Witcher. You've been taking livestock, frightening folk." "I have taken nothing." Her reflection tilted its head. "The living wander where they should not. This place remembers me." "Marta," he said quietly. "You're the one buried here?" She smiled faintly. "Buried? Forgotten? The world forgets quickly, Witcher, but some memories root deep. They feed, as all things do." The mirror rippled like water, and for a moment her hand reached through it, translucent and trembling. Frost spread across the glass from her touch. Geralt stepped back, drawing a sign with his free hand. "Irden." A violet glow sprang from his fingers, tracing a circle around the shack's interior. The air thickened, the reflection recoiled, her face distorting. "You would bind me again?" she hissed. "Not bind, release." Her scream tore through the room, cold enough to crack the mirror. Shards rained to the floor, each reflecting her image, dozens of faces twisted in rage and grief. The Witcher slashed, steel cutting through air and shadow alike. Each shard burst into mist as his blade passed. When the last fragment fell, the room grew still. Geralt stood in the silence, breath misting in the cold.
The runes at his feet glowed faintly, repaired by his sign's power. The ward was restored. He stepped outside. The mist had lifted slightly, the moon hanging low and bloodless above the fen. The air smelled cleaner, though the scent of death still lingered faintly beneath. A voice drifted from behind him, soft, almost fond, always cleaning up after the mistakes of others. Geralt turned. Regis stood at the edge of the path, cloak drawn tight against the cold. "I thought you'd gone south," the Witcher said.
"I did," the vampire replied with a wry smile. "For a time. But solitude, it seems, breeds reflection, not peace. I followed rumor and found you instead. You have a talent for stumbling into restless spirits." Geralt sheathed his sword. "Coincidence? Is it ever?" Regis looked toward the ruined shack. "What was she?" "Human once. The villagers broke her warding circle when they looted her house. She lingered." "Ah," Regis's expression softened. "Another soul unable to forget?" "Seems to be a pattern lately." The vampire chuckled quietly. "You attract such patterns, Geralt? Perhaps because you share them." Geralt ignored the jab. "If you came to lecture me, pick a warmer night." Regis stepped closer, eyes glinting red in the moonlight. "Not a lecture, a warning. You tore down one bond in Oxenford, but others like it remain. The school of the Crane left more than ruins. They tampered with boundaries between life, death, and memory. Var Atra was only the first to stir them." Geralt frowned. "You're saying there's more out there?" "I'm saying," Regis replied, "that the past has learned to breathe again." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind sighing through the reeds. Then the vampire drew something from his cloak, a small blackened crystal, no larger than a coin. "I found this on my way north," he said, handing it over. "It hums with the same energy as the sigils in the Crane Keep. Keep it close, and it may reveal what hunts you or who." Geralt took it, weighing it in his palm. The crystal was cold, its surface smooth as river stone. Inside, faint red veins pulsed like distant lightning. "Appreciate the gift," he said. Regis inclined his head. "We're both too old for gifts. Call it a precaution." The Witcher slipped the crystal into his pouch. "Then I'll heed your warning." "Do," Regis said softly, "because next time memory may not be so willing to let go." With that, the vampire turned and was gone, vanishing into the mist as though the night had swallowed him whole. Geralt remained a while longer, staring at the shack, the restored ward glowing faintly beneath the moon. Then he mounted Roach and set off along the river path once more. The crystal in his pouch throbbed faintly in rhythm with his medallion, as if answering an unseen call from far away. He didn't look back. The road ahead stretched pale under the winter stars, winding toward whatever waited next. Old sins, new monsters, and the restless dead that remembered too much. Somewhere in the darkness the world whispered, and Geralt rode on, following its voice into the frost. Snow fell steadily over the Pontar Valley, soft and unhurried. By the time Geralt reached the foothills of the Mahakam Range, the drifts were knee-deep, and the world lay hushed beneath a pall of white. The path wound between stands of fir trees heavy with frost, their branches drooping like tired sentinels. No bird sang, no wind stirred, only the rhythmic crunch of Roach's hooves, breaking the crust of snow. Geralt's cloak was stiff with ice, his breath steaming in the air. Winter had tightened its grip early, and the land felt emptier than usual. Still, there was work to be done. He had followed whispers from Temeria's outlying villages.
Rumors of lights seen at night near an abandoned monastery, of hunters found drained of strength, their faces pale but unmarked. It was the lack of wounds that troubled him, always that same sign. No trace left. He camped that night beneath an outcropping of stone, the fire small but bright. The wind hissed softly through the pines, carrying the faint crackle of ice. As Geralt stripped his gauntlets and warmed his hands, his fingers brushed the small black crystal Regis had given him. Even through the leather of his pouch, it pulsed faintly, as if answering something beyond the veil of the night. He took it out and held it near the firelight. The veins inside glimmered, pulsing in slow rhythm like a heart. "Trouble follows you, doesn't it?" he murmured. The crystal's glow deepened for a moment as though in reply. Then faintly a whisper filled the air, words too faint to discern, carried on a breath colder than the snow. Geralt's medallion trembled. He rose, scanning the shadows, every sense straining. The forest around him seemed to shift. Snow fell more thickly, muffling the world, and from the whiteness came a shape, tall, hooded, and utterly still. The Witcher's hand went to his sword. "Show yourself." The figure moved closer. Beneath the hood gleamed a pale mask carved of bone. When it spoke, the voice was low and even. "Witcher of Rivia, you carry what was not meant for you." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "You'll have to be more specific." "The shard you hold," the stranger said, "it belongs to the Crane Circle. Its song calls to the dead." "Then you know what this is." "I know more than that." The figure lifted a gloved hand. "I am the last guardian of the monastery to which it leads." Geralt said nothing, weighing his options. "If you're a guardian, you've not done much guarding. People are dying." "They disturb the resting ground," the voice replied. "The shard draws them, those whose memories were never laid to rest. It is a key, and you, Witcher, have awakened it." Before Geralt could answer, the crystal flared crimson in his palm. A wave of heat surged through his veins and images burst behind his eyes. Stone halls buried in frost, runes burning on cracked walls, and a sigil shaped like a crane unfolding its wings. When the vision faded, he was on one knee, breath shallow. The hooded figure stood unmoving. "You have seen," it said. "The monastery lies north in the mountains. Within it rests the remnant of what your kind once sought to destroy. The Crane Masters bound souls as others bind steel. And what do you want of me?" "Nothing," the figure said simply. "But if you wish to end the deaths, you must go there, break the key, bury the memory once more." Geralt rose, sheathing his sword. "Then I suppose I'm heading north." The stranger inclined its head. "Take care, Witcher. The past hungers. It remembers all who trespass." When he blinked, the figure was gone. Only the snow remained, falling steady as ash. 2 days later, Geralt reached the mountains. The path grew treacherous, ice-slick stones, narrow passes flanked by cliffs that vanished into white voids. The wind keened through the peaks, biting through cloak and mail alike. He found the monastery at dusk. It clung to the mountainside like a scar, its towers black against the snow, its gates half buried and rimed with frost. The sigil of the crane carved above the archway was cracked down the middle. Geralt dismounted and led Roach to a sheltered hollow. "Stay," he murmured, stroking her neck. "Won't be long." He drew his silver sword before entering. The main courtyard was silent, filled with drifts of snow that glittered under the moonlight. The doors to the chapel stood open, swinging faintly on rusted hinges. Inside, rows of statues lined the walls, figures in monks' robes, faces hidden behind masks of stone. Their hands were pressed together in prayer. As Geralt stepped closer, his medallion began to hum. He glanced down and saw frost forming beneath his boots, spreading outward in thin veins. Then one of the statues moved. The sound was soft, a scrape of stone, the faint crack of ice. Slowly, its head turned toward him. The mask split down the center, and from the fracture poured a pale mist that coiled like breath in winter air. One by one, the others followed, cracking open, releasing the same spectral vapor. Specters bound within the stone. The crane monks had sealed themselves in death. The air shimmered as their forms emerged, half human, half light. Dozens of hollow eyes fixed on him. Their voices rose in a whispering chant that filled the hall. Geralt backed toward the altar. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what binds you." He drew the crystal from his pouch. At once, the specters flinched back, their chant breaking into a low wail. The shard pulsed, pulling at them. "Earden!" he shouted, slamming the sign into the ground. The violet circle blazed beneath his feet, anchoring him against the rush of energy. Ghosts collided with the barrier, shrieking. Geralt hurled the crystal toward the altar. It struck the stone and shattered. Light burst outward, a blinding wave that hurled him to the floor. The specter's cries rose to a deafening pitch, then faded one by one. When silence returned, the hall was empty. Only the faint hum of his medallion remained, fading slowly. Geralt pushed himself to his feet. The statues stood whole again, their cracks sealed, their faces peaceful. The sigil above the altar glowed faintly once, then went dark. Outside, the snow had stopped. The moon hung high, silver and cold. The Witcher exhaled, breath curling before him. "Another curse laid to rest," he said softly. He turned to leave and stopped. By the doorway, the hooded guardian stood once more. Its mask was gone, revealing a woman's face, pale and serene. "You have done what I could not," she said. "The circle is ended." "Ended?" "Every memory buried leaves behind a shadow. Yours will come for you, too, in time." She smiled faintly, then dissolved into mist, leaving only a trace of warmth in the frozen air. Geralt stepped into the courtyard. The wind had calmed, the stars gleaming sharp above the peaks. He looked toward the long road winding south, and for the first time in many nights, the crystal in his pouch was still. He mounted Roach and rode down from the mountains, the snow crunching softly beneath the hooves. Behind him, the monastery's spires vanished into the white horizon, and the whispers of the dead were silent once more. But deep within the Witcher's thoughts, the woman's final words lingered. "The past hungers. It remembers all who trespass." And Geralt knew the hunt was not yet done. By the time Geralt descended from the Mahakam peaks, the snow had turned to sleet. Gray clouds dragged low over the horizon, and the wind carried the bitter tang of iron from the river below. Roach moved carefully along the ice-crusted path, her breath misting in the cold air. The Witcher's cloak hung heavy with frost, his mind heavier still. He had buried the shard of the crane circle deep within the monastery ruins before leaving, yet even now he could feel its absence like a missing tooth, a small, sharp ache at the edge of awareness. The crystal had pulsed with a life not its own, whispering of memory, death, and the thin veil between them. And the Guardian's final words echoed still in his thoughts. "Every memory buried leaves behind a shadow." The road wound through a stretch of forest, silent save for the hiss of sleet on the leaves. Tracks marked the path ahead, boot prints, many of them fresh. He slowed Roach to a walk and drew his cloak tighter. Soldiers, by the look of the prints, heavy steps, ordered lines, and something else. Drag marks, light but distinct. Lovely, he muttered. Bandits, deserters, or corpses, never anything simple. The trees thinned. The path opened onto a small clearing where a campfire burned low against the drizzle. Around it huddled 4 men in Redanian armor, their faces drawn with exhaustion. One rose quickly when Geralt appeared, hand going to the hilt of his sword. "Hold," Geralt said calmly, raising a gloved hand. "Not looking for trouble." The soldier's eyes narrowed. "A witcher." His voice held both suspicion and relief. "You've picked a cursed time to travel these woods." Geralt dismounted. "I've heard worse." The man gestured toward the fire. "Then warm yourself. We've been tracking something, beast, spirit. We can't tell which. It's been taking our patrols. Leaves no blood, no tracks, just empty armor." Geralt's brow furrowed. The words sank deep. "Where?" "North of here, near the ruins of the Abbey of the Glade. Thought it was abandoned?" "Abbey?" The soldier nodded. "Old place. Scholars once, then monks. Burned during the war. Now only the ghosts keep it." The witcher's lips tightened. "Another ruin, another place where the dead can't sleep. I'll take a look." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. "You go alone, Witcher?" "The thing's killed 6 men." Geralt's hand brushed the silver hilt at his back. "That's why I'm going alone." He left Roach tied near the camp and made for the abbey. The sleet turned to rain, hissing on the stone. The forest opened into a field of charred pillars and collapsed walls. Statues lay toppled in the mud, faces half buried. He moved through the ruins in silence, every step measured. His medallion began to vibrate faintly. The air was thick with residue, necromantic, old and deep. Then he saw it. A figure kneeling by the broken altar. A man, or what had once been one, cloaked in shadow, head bowed, armor blackened with age. "Another restless soul," Geralt said softly. The figure lifted its head. Eyes glowed pale blue through the dark. "Witcher." The voice was hollow, echoing from somewhere far away. "You should not have come." "I've heard that before." Geralt stepped closer. "What are you?" The shade rose slowly. In life, he might have been a knight, a Redanian crest still faintly visible on his breastplate. "A guardian. Once. Now only memory." "Memory's been causing a lot of trouble lately." The knight tilted his head, studying him. "Then you carry the taint of it as well." Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. "Explain." The ghost's gaze flickered toward the sky. When the circle fell, their rites spread like cracks through the world. Fragments of their work scattered. Keys, vessels, echoes. The one you destroyed was not the first. "And not the last," Geralt said grimly. The ghost nodded. "There are others, bound to places where the old ways linger. The crane taught that memory gives power. They sought to keep it, to wield it. But memory does not serve. It consumes." The Witcher's medallion thrummed violently. A second presence stirred nearby, heavy and cold. The rain fell harder, and from the far side of the ruins came a whispering sound. Soft, like silk, dragged across stone. Geralt turned. "What's here with us?" The ghost's expression darkened. "The echo of what I failed to guard." From the shadows emerged a form of pure darkness, rippling as though made from smoke and moonlight. Its face was a shifting void, its eyes burning white. It moved without sound, gliding over the stones. Geralt drew his sword in one smooth motion. "You didn't mention it had company." "Destroy it," the night rasped before it remembers me again. The wraith shrieked, a sound that pierced marrow. It lunged, trailing tendrils of frost. Geralt rolled aside, swung wide, silver slicing through mist. The blow met resistance, but the thing did not bleed. Instead, shards of memory burst from the wound. Images, flickering and quick. A burning abbey, monks screaming, a woman's face crying for mercy. The Witcher steadied himself. "All right," he muttered, "so that's what you are, a collection of regrets." He traced the sign of Yrden across the mud. The circle flared violet, anchoring the spirit within. The wraith struck again, its claws sparking against the barrier. Geralt moved inside its reach, thrust deep and twisted. The creature howled, unraveling in a storm of light and smoke. When it vanished, the world fell silent once more. Geralt turned to the ghostly night, but the spirit was fading too. "You have freed it," the knight said softly, "but others remain. The circle's work binds the north like roots beneath the soil. Break them, Witcher, or we shall never rest." "Where?" "Follow the river," the ghost whispered, "to the marsh where stars drown. There you will find the last of the crane's masters." His form dissolved into mist, leaving only a faint shimmer in the rain. Geralt sheathed his sword, the motion weary. "Marshes," he muttered. "Always marshes." He returned to the soldiers' camp by dawn. They stared as he approached, mud-smeared and silent. "Well?" the sergeant asked. "Is it done?" "For now." "What was it?" Geralt met his eyes. "A mistake that refused to die." They didn't ask more. He saddled Roach and turned west, where the river wound through the mist like a silver serpent. The ghost's words weighed heavy on him. The circle's work binds the north like roots. If that was true, he'd not seen the end of this. Snow began to fall again, soft and slow. Geralt drew up his hood and rode on, the world shrinking to the quiet rhythm of hoofbeats and the whisper of falling white. Behind him the ruined abbey stood silent, its stones slick with rain. Yet beneath them, deep in the earth, something stirred, an echo answering the crystal's absence, a heartbeat that did not belong to the living. The wind carried it faintly to the Witcher's ears, a single word that lingered soft as breath. Remember. He didn't look back. The road ahead was long, and the shadows of the past followed close behind. The river widened into a gray expanse that mirrored the sky, motionless, endless, and cold. Geralt rode along its banks, the reeds whispering against his boots, frost cracking beneath Roach's hooves. The marshes that sprawled ahead were the color of iron and smoke, a labyrinth of stagnant pools and twisted willows. Few sane men came this far. The Witcher could taste why. Rot, old blood, and the faintest pulse of magic, old and festering, like a wound that never healed. He had followed the Ghost Knight's final words to the marsh where stars drown, and the trail had led him here, to the forgotten wetlands between Temeria and Redania. Locals spoke of them in frightened tones, calling the place Starfen. They said lights wandered there at night, will-o'-wisps that lured travelers to their doom. Others whispered of monks seen wading through the mire, faces hidden beneath hoods of bone-white cloth. The kind of place, Geralt thought, that always has a story, and something left behind to make it real. The day waned quickly. Mist thickened as dusk bled into evening, curling around the trees like ghostly serpents. When the last of the light faded, he made camp on a patch of higher ground. The fire struggled against the damp, sputtering as it ate at the wet wood. From the reeds came a faint sound, a melody, thin, fragile, almost human. Geralt froze, listening. The tune wound through the fog like thread through cloth, drawing closer, clearer. It was not the song of any bird or beast. He stood and drew his sword. "Come out," he said, voice low. The song stopped. Then from the mist, a shape emerged. A woman in a tattered robe, her skin pale as the moonlight. Her eyes glowed faintly, her hair clung to her face like seaweed. "Witcher," she whispered, "you carry their scent." Geralt didn't lower the blade. "Whose?" "The Circle, the ones who trapped us here." He frowned. "You're one of them." She smiled faintly. "Once? Before we became what we sought to control?" She raised a hand. In her palm flickered a faint red light, pulsing in rhythm with his medallion. "You broke their crystal, but the last master lives still. He calls from beneath the waters. He waits for the one who will remember his name. Then I'll make sure he's disappointed," Geralt said. The smile faded. "Be careful, Witcher. He does not forget, and memory is stronger than blood." The light in her hand dimmed, and she melted back into the fog, leaving only ripples where she had stood. Geralt sheathed his sword and doused the fire. There would be no sleep tonight. He rode at first light, guided by instinct and the faint hum of his medallion. The fog had thickened, turning the marsh into a sea of white. Shapes loomed in the distance, ruined pylons, broken bridges, and the ribs of a ship long buried in the mud. Crows wheeled above, black against the pale sky. Hours passed. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. At last he saw it, a spire rising from the heart of the marsh, black stone slick with moss and water. Around its base, faint lights moved. Wisps or souls, he couldn't tell. He tethered Roach among the reeds and approached on foot. The tower's doorway yawned open, framed by runes half-eaten by decay. Within, faint torchlight flickered, though no smoke rose. Geralt stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of mold and iron. The floor beneath his boots was covered in shallow water that reflected the stone ceiling like a dark mirror. At the center of the chamber, a circle of runes glowed faintly, and there, kneeling within it, was a figure draped in crimson robes. "I've been expecting you," the man said. His voice was calm, deliberate, as though every word were part of some long-rehearsed prayer. Geralt kept his sword low. "Then you know why I'm here." "I do. You followed the echoes of what you destroyed. The circle's remnants, the fragments of memory." The man rose, lifting his head. His face was ageless, his eyes a pale, clouded gray. "But you don't understand, Witcher. You cannot destroy memory. You can only inherit it." "Then explain why the dead are still walking in your wake." "They walk because they remember," the man replied, "and because I allow them to. The world forgets too easily. We sought to preserve what was lost. Names, faces, feelings. We bound them to the living so they would never fade. Would you not wish the same for those you've lost?" Geralt said nothing, but something cold twisted in his chest.
The man smiled faintly. "Ah, you would deny it, but you carry ghosts of your own. Every Witcher does. Each contract, each kill, etched in your memory. What I offer is mercy, a world where nothing truly dies." "I've seen what your mercy looks like," Geralt said. "A trail of corpses." "Corpses forget," the man said softly, "but memory endures." The air shuddered. Water rippled across the floor as a deep hum filled the chamber. From beneath the runes, shapes began to rise, figures of translucent light, their faces familiar. Geralt froze. He saw Vesemir's calm eyes,
Ciri's fierce gaze, even Yen's faint wry smile, all illusions all too perfect. "Stop it," he growled. "Why?" the master whispered. "Don't you wish to remember them as they were?" Geralt raised his sword. "Not like this." He traced the sign of Igni, flames bursting from his fingers. The illusions vanished in a rush of smoke. The master's smile faltered. "So be it," he said. "You reject remembrance. You choose oblivion. Then I will make you part of it." The runes flared crimson. A wave of power surged outward, hurling Geralt back. He struck the wall hard, pain exploding behind his eyes. The water darkened, bubbling as something vast stirred beneath it. From the depths rose a creature. No simple specter, but a form of living memory itself. It towered over the chamber, a mass of faces and limbs woven from mist and light, whispering with 1,000 voices. Geralt forced himself upright. "You people never learn." He drew a deep breath and cast Quen, the shield flaring around him. The creature lunged, its arm striking like a hammer. The impact shook the room, but the barrier held. Geralt rolled aside, slashed at the glowing tendons that bound its form. Each cut loosed a cry, not pain but fragments of remembered lives, laughter and screams alike. The master's voice rose above the din. "You cannot kill what you are made of." "Watch me!" Geralt hurled a vial of moon dust. The explosion filled the chamber with silver light, and the creature shrieked as its form began to unravel. He followed, with Igni, the flames searing through mist and memory alike. The master staggered, the runes beneath him cracking. "No," he cried. "You'll erase everything." "That's the idea." Geralt struck once more, silver blade cutting through the last tether. The creature exploded in a storm of light and sound, blinding and deafening. When it faded, the chamber was empty save for the Witcher, the shattered runes, and the faint scent of burned incense. He stood amid the wreckage, breathing hard. The water at his feet was still. The lights in the marsh had gone dark. Geralt wiped his blade and sheathed it. "Rest then," he murmured, "all of you." As he left the tower, dawn broke over the horizon. The mist thinned, and the river glimmered like liquid glass. Roach waited patiently, stamping her hooves in the cold. Geralt mounted, casting one last glance at the black spire behind him. It stood silent now, its reflection calm upon the water. He turned north toward the rising sun. The wind smelled of thawing earth, faintly hopeful, but beneath it lingered another scent, old and distant like parchment and dust. He touched the scarred leather pouch at his side where once the crystal had pulsed, and wondered if memory ever truly died, or if it merely changed shape, waiting for someone new to remember. He rode on, the marsh fading behind him, the past quiet for now. The thaw came slow to the marshlands. Patches of earth showed through the ice like old scars, and the air, though still sharp with winter, carried the faintest scent of renewal. Geralt rode along a narrow dike road where reeds rose tall as his shoulders, their heads bent beneath the weight of frost. The world seemed hushed, the silence broken only by the distant cawing of crows and the soft rhythm of roaches' hooves. He'd left the tower behind 3 days past, yet the echo of its collapse still lingered in his thoughts. The red-robed master's final cry, "You'll erase everything," rattled in his skull like loose stones in a jar. He had destroyed the last of the circle, ended the chain that had bound memory to flesh. Or so he hoped. But the Witcher knew too well that such things rarely stayed buried. As evening settled, he found shelter beneath an old willow whose roots gripped the edge of a sluggish stream. The sky bled into purple and gray, and the first stars emerged, faint and cold. He built a small fire, fed it dry reeds, and watched the smoke twist upward. His medallion was still now, utterly still. It should have brought peace. It didn't. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small sealed flask, dark glass corked with wax. Within swirled a faint glimmer of red, a remnant he hadn't told anyone about. During the destruction of the tower, when the master's great conjuring had burst apart, something of that power had fled, and Geralt, by instinct or by curse, had caught it. He had told himself it was only a precaution, a keepsake to study, to understand. The longer he kept it, the heavier it seemed to grow. He turned the flask in his hand, watching the light play across it. The glow inside pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "Not again," he muttered, setting it down beside the fire. The night deepened. Somewhere across the marsh, a wolf howled, the sound long and mournful. Geralt sat unmoving, listening until the silence returned. He didn't notice the change at first, the way the flames began to burn lower, thinner, until the fire's glow seemed swallowed by shadow. Then his medallion stirred, a low vibration, almost hesitant. He looked up. A figure stood beyond the reach of the firelight, tall, indistinct, more silhouette than substance. Its presence pressed against the night, like a memory refusing to fade. "I told you," Geralt said softly. "Stay gone." The figure didn't answer. It stepped closer, the darkness shifting around it. The Witcher rose slowly, hand on his sword. "Var Atra's gone," he said. "The circle's gone, whatever you are. Whatever's left. You've no business here." Still no answer. The fire flickered blue, throwing long shadows across the reeds. For an instant, the figure's face caught the light, and Geralt froze. It was Melara, not the spectral wraith he'd once freed, but whole, breathing, her eyes luminous as candle flame. She looked at him with neither sorrow nor anger, only something like curiosity. "You remember?" she said. Her voice was low, almost human. "That is enough." He took a step forward, wary. "You shouldn't exist?" "Perhaps not, yet memory is stubborn, Witcher. You took a piece of it when you left the tower." Geralt's eyes flicked to the flask beside the fire. The red within it glowed brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with her words. "What do you want?" "Nothing. To see what becomes of those who carry ghosts. I've had my share." She smiled faintly. "And still you endure. Strange creature." Her gaze drifted to the flask. "Destroy it before it roots too deep. The circle may be gone, but what they touched endures in every mind that remembers. You are its vessel now." Geralt stared at the fire, the red light reflecting in his eyes. "If I destroy it, what happens to you?" "I fade, as all memories do. That is as it should be." He hesitated. "You said the same before." "Yes," she murmured, "and still you chose to remember." The Witcher knelt, picking up the flask. The glass was cold as grave ice, the pulse within steady and slow. He tightened his grip. "Maybe this time I get it right." He hurled the flask into the flames. The glass shattered, the fire roaring high and white. For a moment it burned too bright to look at. Then came the sound, a sigh, soft and endless, like the marsh exhaling. When his vision cleared, the fire was ordinary again. Melara was gone. Only the scent of lilies lingered faintly on the air. Geralt sat back, shoulders sagging. The medallion was quiet once more, the night still. He watched the fire burn low, embers winking like dying stars. Dawn came pale and thin. The Witcher rose, scattered the ashes, and prepared to move on. As he tightened Roach's saddle straps, he caught sight of something half buried in the mud, a feather black as obsidian, glinting faintly in the morning light. He picked it up. It was warm to the touch. He turned it over in his hand, frowning. A crane feather. Always leave something behind, don't you? He muttered, tucking it into his pouch. The road ahead wound through the wetlands toward the forests of Aidern. Word was a beast had been stalking the merchant roads there, something with a taste for iron and blood. Simple work, perhaps, predictable. It would be a relief. He mounted Roach and urged her forward. The morning mist clung to the ground like ghost breath, and behind him, the willow under which he had camped sagged low, its bark blackened where the strange fire had burned. By midday, he reached the first of the forest villages, a cluster of thatched roofs around a frozen well. The people stared as he rode through, their faces pale with hunger and suspicion. One old man stepped forward, leaning on a stick. "Witcher," he croaked. "You'll take the contract, then?" Geralt reined in. "Depends what's eating you." "Not what, who?" the old man said. "Men vanish from the woods. No screams, no blood, no sign. We find their tools laid out neat, like offerings. You'll come see?" The Witcher nodded. "Show me." They walked beyond the fields to the tree line, where frost clung thick to the branches. The tracks ended at a clearing. In its center stood a great standing stone carved with runes nearly worn away by time. At its base lay a single item, a mask of white marble shaped like a bird's beak. Geralt's stomach tightened. The old man crossed himself. "Found it there this morning?" The Witcher crouched, brushing frost from the mask. Beneath the grime, the carving was unmistakable. The crane sigil. "Burn it," he said sharply. "What is it? Something best forgotten?" The villager hesitated. "And you, Witcher? Will you stay?" Geralt straightened, eyes cold. "I'll see this through." The old man nodded and hurried off. Geralt stood alone in the clearing, the mask gleaming faintly in the winter light. He reached into his pouch, fingers brushing the black crane feather. For a moment he considered throwing it away. Instead, he let it fall back into the pouch. The wind rose, whispering through the trees. Far to the north, thunder rolled across the mountains. Geralt drew his cloak tighter and turned toward the heart of the forest. "No rest for the remembered," he muttered. "No rest at all." And he walked on, the snow crunching softly beneath his boots, the shadows closing around him like the pages of a story not yet finished. Evening fell early in the forest, the light swallowed by the tangle of ancient oaks and towering pines. The air was thick with the musk of damp earth and decay. Geralt followed the narrow track into the trees, his eyes cutting through the dimness, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. The wind whispered through the branches like a voice struggling to be heard, and somewhere in that whisper, he could almost make out words. "Remember, remember." He had not told the villagers to follow. He preferred to hunt alone, and besides, what waited here was not meant for simple men with pitchforks and fear. The old mask of the crane lay buried now, ashes scattered by the fire. But such things did not end with burning. The forest deepened. Mist coiled between the roots, curling around his boots. The medallion at his throat trembled lightly, a steady vibration that spoke of magic, old magic, faint but insistent, like a heartbeat muffled beneath layers of soil. He reached a clearing after some time, a ring of stones, each carved with runes so worn they looked like veins in rock. In the center stood a figure. At first glance, it seemed carved of shadow, tall and robed, its face hidden by a long beaked mask. Its hands were clasped before it as though in prayer. Around its feet lay small offerings, rusted blades, coins, and bloodless bones. Geralt approached slowly. "You're far from your monastery," he said. The figure lifted its head. The mask gleamed faintly in the gloom, and behind it, eyes burned like embers in ash. "You carry their marks still," it said, voice deep and hollow. "The feather, the memory." Geralt's jaw tightened. "If you're another echo of the circle, I'm tired of this game." "This is no echo. I am what they tried to create. I am the keeper of remembrance, the one they built to hold all that should never have been forgotten." "Then you're their mistake." "Perhaps. But mistakes endure longer than truths." The creature took a step forward, and the air grew heavy. Geralt drew his sword in a smooth motion, the silver catching what little light remained. "They bound their souls to memory," the keeper said, "and when they perished, I became the vessel. Their knowledge, their guilt, their love, it all lives in me. You destroyed their works, but their purpose remains." "Purpose?" Geralt spat. "You mean this? Feeding on the living, dragging them into your past?" The keeper tilted its masked head. "The living forget too easily. I only remind them what they owe to the dead. I've had enough of reminders." He lunged. Steel flashed through the air. The keeper moved like a shadow in water, effortless, silent. Geralt's blade met no flesh, only cold. The creature's form rippled, then split, becoming 2, then 4, then a dozen shades circling him like a murmuration of black birds. He struck, parried, spun, his signs flaring in quick succession. Yrden, Quen, Igni. The circle of ghosts faltered, momentarily bound by the violet glow, but the keeper's voice came from all sides now, echoing like a chant. "Every cut you make, Witcher, every life you take, each one is written in you. You are as bound as we were." "Difference is," Geralt grunted, "I'm still breathing." He hurled a bomb dimeridium into the air. It burst with a dull flash, the shock wave collapsing the shadows into a single form. The keeper staggered back, its mask cracked, revealing pale skin etched with scars like runes. Beneath the mask's break, Geralt glimpsed a human mouth, a man's. "Who were you?" he demanded. The creature straightened, the glow of its eyes dimming. "Once," it said slowly, "a scholar of Oxenfurt, one of the first to join the Crane. We sought to save what war and time would erase. I volunteered to become their vessel." Geralt's blade lowered slightly. "And now? Now I am nothing but the weight of memory. Each century adds another stone. I cannot forget. I cannot rest. Then maybe I can help with that." The keeper's cracked mask turned toward him. "Would you grant me oblivion, Witcher, you who walk burdened by the dead?" Geralt hesitated. He saw flashes of faces. Vesemir, Renfrey, countless nameless villagers, the ghosts that never left him. "Maybe we both need to learn to let go." The keeper's eyes softened, the red fading to gray. "Then do what must be done." Geralt stepped forward. The creature didn't resist. He drove his silver sword through its chest, clean and quick. There was no cry, no struggle, only a slow exhale, like a sigh released after centuries held. Light bled from the wound, soft, golden, almost warm. It spread through the forest, washing over the stones, the trees, the mist. For a moment, everything was still. Then the light faded, taking the keeper with it. The clearing was empty. Geralt stood alone, breath clouding in the cold. The medallion lay still once more. He wiped the blade clean and sheathed it. At the center of the clearing where the creature had stood, a single black feather rested on the frozen ground. He picked it up, twirling it between his fingers. "Seems I can't get rid of you," he murmured. The wind stirred. Somewhere in the distance, a crane called, a strange, lonely sound, echoing through the forest. He left the clearing without looking back. The night grew darker as he walked, but the air felt different, lighter, freer. Perhaps something had been set right after all. By dawn, the forest opened onto the river valley once more. The village roofs gleamed with frost in the first light. When the people saw him returning, they came out quietly, hope mixed with fear in their eyes. "Well?" the old man asked. "Is it done?" Geralt nodded. "It's done." The villager crossed himself. "And what was it?" "A memory," the Witcher said simply. "One that won't trouble you anymore." He collected his pay without haggling and mounted Roach. The road stretched west, silver beneath the pale sun. The marshes smoked faintly in the distance as though exhaling their last breath. Geralt rode on, the black feather tucked into his glove. The wind was cold, but he felt something almost unfamiliar stirring in him, something like quiet. He did not know if the past could ever be buried, not truly, but for now at least, it slept, and that was enough. As the road curved north toward Kaer Morhen, he glanced once more at the sky. Cranes wheeled high above, their wings glinting in the morning light. "Fly far," he murmured, "leave no traces." The birds vanished into the sun, and the Witcher rode beneath them, his shadow long on the frozen ground, heading home at last, through a world that remembered and forgot.